Warm welcome to this special interview. My name is Anoop Verma. I am the editor of ET Government, which is a vertical of the Economic Times focused on covering government initiatives and policies. Today, our guest for this special interview is Major General BK Sharma. He is the Director General of United Service Institution of India, USI. USI is India's oldest think tank, established in 1870. The organization has an illustrious tradition of working in the area of military history and strategy for over 150 years. Welcome, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you very much, Anoopji, for giving me this opportunity.
The topic of today's conversation with Major General Sharma is the law and order situation in Jammu and the steps that the government can take to bring social and economic improvement in the region. After the abrogation of Article 370 in August 2019, Kashmir has become relatively stable, but there have been incidents of violence in Jammu. So what are the reasons behind these incidents of violence? Because Jammu was thought to be relatively quieter than Kashmir. Now the opposite seems to be happening.
Thank you, Anoopji. At the outset, I wish all our viewers a happy Independence Day. And on this, on a very positive note, I'm happy to say that the peace has returned to Valley. As we have seen in the recently held parliamentary elections, there's been unprecedented voter turnout, about more than 58% in Kashmir Valley, 70% in Jammu, and 72% in Ladakh Union Territory. Also, there's been an increase, 25% increase in the sort of candidates who came forward to contest in these elections. Today, tourism is doing extremely well in Kashmir, and the local economy has got a boost. And all this can be attributable to sustainable multi-pronged efforts by the Government of India to bring peace and normalcy in the region. I would particularly like to comment on the success of a counter-terrorism grid, which is very dense, multi-layered, and certain actions initiated to disrupt the entire terrorist ecosystem in the valley, particularly terror financing and neutralization of overground workers, has helped a lot. As far as Jammu region is concerned, because our whole attention was focused in Kashmir Valley, this area got neglected. There was a notion or a myth that Jammu has become incident-free, and it caused certain complacency and consequent weakening of the grid. Now, we should have understood that Pakistan's intent to destabilize India and keep Jammu and Kashmir on the boil will not change. And they are apt at evolving and adapting new designs to keep the pot boiling. And this is exactly what happened in the Jammu region. What has happened that there were certain socio-political factors which came into being post the abrogation of Article 370. One is a certain degree of resentment, which is there and which is also resonates very well across the line of control on the other side, right? So they were able to encash on these sentiments, and there are a large number of family members from Punch and Rajouri who work in the Gulf region. So they were able to, through ISI, network these people and start reactivating the overground network in the Jammu region. Jammu region also gives them other avenues of infiltration, not only from the LOC, but from a relatively porous border of Jammu and also Punjab. And these all lead to the intermediate zone and depth areas, which gives them multiple options to carry out concurrent operations in different parts in the mountainous areas, so which they were able to exploit. Also, the demography also helps them, because most of the people who are living in Punch and Rajouri area predominantly belong to so-called minority community, and even Chinha belt, the population is delicately poised, about 48% Hindus and 52% Muslims, and particularly in the upper reaches of mountainous belt, there are more pockets of Muslim population, and also there are nomads like Gujar and Bakarwals who go to these regions, and in the past also they provided logistic and sustenance and support to the terrorists. And even this time that support is coming in some form or the other. Likewise, there is also a governance deficit in Jammu region, right? Unemployment is on an increase. There is a relative sense of economic deprivation, and corruption also needs to be weeded out. So this is a kind of a mix of these factors which help Pakistan to reignite terrorism in Jammu region.
You noted that there was an intelligence grid that Indian government had established to bring peace to the region. When Article 370 was abrogated, there were a lot of comments in the media and among the politicians also that this will lead to a wave of protests in the region. But that didn't happen. So was it due to the intelligence grid or some other factors also had a role to play in ensuring that the protests didn't take place and the area remained absolutely almost quite peaceful?
See, as I explained to you, that traditionally people of Punch and Rajouri had accepted Indian nationalism. They had embraced Indian nationalism, and their sentiments are very different from that of Kashmir Valley. Similarly, in Chenab and this Doda Bhadrawa area, also people had long reconciled to the idea being part and parcel of India. And that's the reason that these demonstrations did not take place. And government had also taken certain very viable anticipatory actions which did not erupt into this. But on the other hand, the region was vulnerable to this kind of a guerrilla warfare, kind of a terrorism, because of the demography and the terrain that I explained. So this time, what Pakistan has done, rather than having the classic kind of a terrorism operation, they've gone more into a kind of a guerrilla warfare. These are highly trained Pak terrorists, probably trained by their security forces, and they are not getting into inhabited areas, mixing up with population. They've created their hard hideouts in the far-flung, rugged mountainous areas. And their main target at this time is basically security forces. They're also equipped with state-of-the-art small arms like M4 rifles, which have steel core bullets which can penetrate body armor. They've also got encrypted communication system. Earlier, we were able to decipher their communication, but this time it's become extremely difficult. So these are some of the reasons. And other thing is that they are not actually going into any population areas. Now, what had happened, because of a variety of security reasons, we had to thin out the RR grid from Jammu region, because what happened post Galwan. So this created a vacuum of foots on ground. The classic city grid which was there in place, it got thin out. And if the city grid is not there, then it also weakens the intelligence grid, because your engagement with the public, with the civil population reduces. So int grid also dried up, city grid also dried up, and then what happened concurrently was certain degree of polarization. If you remember that Kathua case in which that Gujar girl was, raped and killed, and its effects on, popular some polarization on religious lines, Jammu region. So all these factors put together have probably created a kind of a semi-fertile ground for Pakistan to play its design all over again.
Pakistan is mired in its own political and economic problems. So, what exactly are they hoping to gain from this kind of activity? What any geopolitical or economic or political advantage that they see?
It's a low cost, high payoff option, right? By sending maybe 50, 60, 100 highly trained people, it doesn't cost Pakistan much, right? So, basic reason why they've been doing this time is that they want to disrupt the assembly elections, which are in September. They also want to generate some kind of a fear psychosis. In the past, what had happened, Pakistan design was in the upper reaches, particularly Chenab belt and upper reaches of Bhadrawa, they had gone for selective targeting of Hindu population, and there were certain migrations which had taken place. They had desecrated certain religious places. So this time over, this is very much part of design to create fear psychosis and to engineer some kind of a communal rights in the region and try to demonstrate to the world that stability has not returned to Jammu and Kashmir, and also show government of India if they postpone elections in a poor light, and show the capacity of Pakistan to sort of heat up the water as per their own liking. So this is overall, I think, part of Pakistan's DNA, and that should not be ignored at all.
So what should be the Indian government's strategic response to deal with this kind of a problem? Because as you said, it's a low-cost option for Pakistan. So can we make it a high-cost option for them? High-cost scenario?
See, firstly, we have to be all convinced here that no matter what we do, at least in the foreseeable future, Pakistan's intent, its design, and its chronic hostility towards India is not going to dilute it. Right? If that is a factor, then we have to be prepared for all kinds of contingencies for Pakistan to whip up terrorism in one form or the other. So my point of view here is that don't let your guard down, right? And wherever there will be a vacuum that we create, Pakistan will exploit that vacuum, and social media and other media platforms today help them, to whip up or to sort of hype up whatever acts of terrorism they do. There are large number of actions that we need to do. Firstly, we need to conceptualize a counter-terrorism grid for the Jammu region, which is in keeping with the local characteristics of terrain, demography, and other nuances, right? It should not be one size that fits all. And particular areas that I would say is that first tier, particularly in the IB sector, needs to be strengthened. Because of elections and other reasons, there was a thinning out of US BSF units. They also don't have top of the notch technology, counter drone technology, counter tech tunneling technology. We need to equip them with this kind of technology, better surveillance and sensors on the border. Second tier, which is generally been held by the CAPF, Central Armed Police Forces. Now, typically what happens, the Central Armed Police Forces should have been in the interim period trained for counterterrorism operations. They are not typically trained for counterterrorism operations. So this should be, our number one priority. Also, don't keep rotating these people every now and then, because once you understood the cultural map and the dynamics of a region, and suddenly you keep changing the battalion, so certain degree of specialization will have to come about, as we've done in case of Maoist inflicted areas in Chhattisgarh and some of these other left-wing extremist affected areas. So similar kind of a grid we need to have. As far as your upper reaches are concerned, these should purely be given to the Indian Army, RR battalions, maybe certain para-SF battalions, and also the village defense guards. And those operations should not be sort of having a permanent grid. It should be a very, I would say, a dynamic CT grid wherein you go for hard core seek and destroy missions, particularly during the summer period when these people will go and occupy these hideouts. So this is a kind of a approach that we need to have. Another very important thing is the technological empowerment of the city grid in terms of having better drone technology, your means to intercept their communication, decipher their communication, direction finders, other electronic warfare means, better body armor, and whole lot of other things. Society engagement is extremely important, right? Because if we talk about people-centric approach and winning the hearts and minds, then if the grid is not there, that effort also, gets diluted. So re-engagement with the community to see that the Gujar, Bakarwals, and other people who can be exploited by terrorists, we keep them on our side, and also engage with the leaders across the religious spectrum, so that they don't fall prey to any Pakistan instigation and engineering some kind of communal rights in the region. which is extremely important, I think, over the years, the unified command system, which was working very well in Jammu and Kashmir, it has got diluted. And today, the new form of unified command system should not only look at the two cores, 15 core and 16 core of Jammu and Kashmir, or the DG polices, but also incorporate the civil administration and police of Himachal Pradesh and Punjab region, so that we have a very, very elaborate, comprehensive, what you call unified command system, who can diagnose the problems and come out with effective solutions to deal with it.
You talked about a unified command system. So the Indian Ministry of Defense is working on theaterization. So will that be lead to a progress in this direction once the theaterization comes into being, or is completely different?
There is a lot of haze about what form these theaterized commands are going to take place. As per one school of thought, I think they are not disturbing Northern Command, and they want to keep it intact so that they can take care of Jammu and Kashmir, both Union territory, and deal with counter-terrorism situations. Because abruptly, to remove army from counter-terrorism operations in a very sensitive state may not be a good option. The transition has to take place unless we have trained our, Central Armed Police Forces. I think this transition will be very, very risky for us. So I think, yes, maybe with this theaterization taking place, this is another very, very important facet, that in the theaterization, and particularly from the perspective of unified command, how do we integrate the local police and central armed police forces into this theaterization? It should not only be confined to military, but incorporate other stakeholders and respondents to this counter-terrorism, particularly in Jammu and Kashmir. This requires a separate discussion and deliberation.
Now, I think everyone was taken by surprise by the events in Bangladesh, where a democratic government was overthrown, and now there is a new governance system over there. So on west, there is Pakistan, which is not democratic, and mired in its own political and economic problems. And now on east also, there is Bangladesh. So the entire Indian subcontinent seems to be getting more and more destabilized, and we don't know when things will become better. So how does India? What steps can India take to protect its democratic culture in the South Indian region that is becoming more and more unstable?
See, this is the biggest dilemma that India today is facing. We have very tense LAC, with Chinese breathing down our neck in Ladakh and even in Arunachal Pradesh. We have an LOC which may be notionally dormant, but you have seen certain bad actions have taken place in Kupwara, and Pakistan cannot be relied. They can hit up the LOC anytime. And then this other thing that has come up in the Jammu region. This is typically a 2.5 front collusive hybrid scenario that we are facing. And we do not have adequate troops. If we keep reshuffling troops every now and then by pulling them out from CT grid and putting them on LOC or LAC or vice versa, it will create a kind of a strategic military imbalance in perpetuity, which will fatigue out Indian troops. So we have to have a de novo look at an entire military strategy to deal with this scenario, right? What kind of a punitive deterrence we need to have against Pakistan, what kind of deterrence by denial we need to have against China, what capabilities we need, and as far as CT is concerned, how do you deal with it on sustainable basis? This is a basic question. Coupled with this now is the societal cohesiveness within India, internal balancing. We have certain problems in our peripheral states which are adjacent to our adversary countries, be it Punjab, be it Jammu and Kashmir, and even Union Territory of Ladakh. There is a situation which is cropped up in Manipur, which doesn't augur well as far as our Act East policy is concerned, and China claims in Arunachal Pradesh. that needs to be pacified. But there is another front which is now opening up, and that is in Bangladesh. We know that there's a hand of Jamaat-e-Islami there, and even Khaleda Zia has that kind of sort of proximity with Jamaat-e-Islami. She's been hobnobbing with them in the past. And if these forces come into power, right, and they remain unchecked, then collectively there is a heightened threat that comes to Siliguri corridor, which is extremely tenuous and a very, very sensitive area. So security of Siliguri corridor assumes importance, and ipso facto, security of our 8 northeastern states also becomes very, very crucial. Now, the worrisome factor here is that China has been able to make good inroads into our neighborhood. You know, there is a pro-China regime in, say, Maldives. We have a regime change, and there's a proclivity to be closer to China in Nepal. Similar thing is military junta in Myanmar is today Chinese, right? And a similar situation could crop up even in Bangladesh, right? So this is a very, and then Chinese have also created these corridors, whether it is China-Pakistan economic corridor, China-Nepal economic corridor, China-Myanmar economic corridor, the maritime Silk Route, in which most of the countries of neighborhood, barring Bhutan, they are signatories of Belt and Road Initiative and Maritime Silk Route. So our today influence is really, it has our strategic space is shrinking. So we first and foremost thing, we have to go back to the drawing board, reimagine and reinvent our neighborhood first policy. And in that, I would say that we should be little more generous. Don't accept reciprocity word by word, deed by deed from these countries. Be little more generous. Come out with some kind of an economic model, integration model, in which connectivity and trade is extremely important. One of the aspiration of these countries is to harness the blue economy of the region. What strides and what assistance we can do so that become a leader in the Indian Ocean region in harnessing blue economy. And in terms of being a key partner in net security, we should not look so much towards what you call is conventional security, but more in the realms of what you call non-traditional security threats. For example, pandemic, you know, your earthquakes, disasters, tsunami, other kinds of help that we need to so create a very robust kind of a ecosystem in which these countries, you know, remain dependent on us, because we have the advantage of strategic geography. They're all our neighbors, and we are going to be the first respondents in the event of any untoward incident happening, whereas China still remains thousands of kilometers away. We also got the cultural affinity, which if we can configure and leverage it properly, it can help in winning hearts and minds of the people. So reimagining and reigniting or rebooting our neighborhood policy requires a lot of imagination. As far as your external balancing is concerned, well, India has taken a position of what you call strategic autonomy and multi-vector engagement. I think that is working very well with us, because no country has been able to hard press us whether we should take China size with Russia or with United States of America, given our size. But more important is that whatever talk we do, to walk the talk, we need to have the leverages. And that is the economic leverage, which should be backed by strong military capabilities. That is extremely important. If we do not have those kind of leverages, then I think we're talking in thin air. So my mantra to all this is, first is development. Second is a very viable deterrence capability. Third is a very nimble-footed, deft diplomacy. Fourth is we must have a strategic leadership which thinks beyond election, a zero-sum game kind of election, that looks at the entire gambit of comprehensive national development and national security. And the last is strategic communication. What is that Indian narrative is, whether it is Viksit Bharat, whether it was Vishwa Mitra, right? That narrative has to be built, and we have to have strategies, system, structures, and skills to propagate that narrative to our own people, to our neighbors, and to rest of the world.
You have rightly noted the rise of China. They are basically very friendly with most of the governments in India's neighborhood, and much of this incursion has been made through their economic power, very little through their military power. So, and China is now also getting very close to Russia. Russia has traditionally been with India, but now with the Chinese becoming very close to them, we can't expect, we can expect things to change over there also. Pakistan is, since the 1970s, Pakistan has been very close to USA. And now in the last 15 years, Pakistan is very close to China. And with Russia coming close to China, I mean, the entire geopolitics seems to of the region seems to be turning against India. So, what can India do to, I mean, survive in this kind of a geopolitical environment and thrive?
I think I partially answered this question earlier, but coming specifically to, you know, China and Russia relations. At the moment, their interests are strategically aligned to counter NATO and American expansionism in the region, right? Because India is distant by geography. But deep down, if you talk to Russians, they look at India as a strategic balancer in Eurasia. So we need to find ways and means of how do we have geographical connectivity with Eurasia. And to that extent, operationalization of international north-south trade corridor in which Iran has to be on board, and this Vladivostok and Chennai corridor, these are strategic imperatives for India, right? But once we are competitive in the Eurasian strategic space, Russians will feel more and more comfortable to do business with us. That's one factor. The second factor that is extremely important, that we have to come out with our own version of Belt and Road Initiative for our neighbors. And geography favors of that. Like we talked about, SARC is a dead horse. I think even to revive it, Pakistan will be a spoil sport there. I don't see much prognosis of SARC. But BIMSTEC is a very viable idea. BBIN, these are very, very viable ideas. Operationalization of Kaladan project and the trilateral highway, which takes us to Southeast Asia, a very viable project. Our engagement through the Indian Ocean region with our ASEAN countries are still very, very viable projects. And our strengthening our position in terms of a maritime sort of influence in the Indian Ocean region. These are highly doable things, provided we have a very viable and sustainable strategy. And I think this should be the course of discussion, that if some avenues are at the moment stymied, how do we open other avenues of strategic engagement? And how do we maximize our strategic space to balance out Chinese? And as part of that, our relationship with the Western countries and United States of America also become important, right? For example, you have Quad and you have a couple of other groupings like you, though I don't think that this India Middle East economic corridor in the foreseeable future has any good prognosis. But there are areas in which we can work with the Western countries to balance China out. But the bottom line is that we have to develop economy. If the economy doesn't develop, then we will not have deep pockets to invest in other social upliftment programs and in your military deterrence capabilities. And the world will also not take us very seriously.
The abrogation of Article 370 was probably the biggest reform measure of Modi government in their second term. So, what can we expect from the government in their third term, in Modi's third term, for further, I mean, bringing securing peace in the region, especially in Jammu, Ladakh, and Kashmir also, and bringing economic development to the area?
See, one good thing is that at least the national and this what is called Democratic Alliance has at least come out with a vision, long-term vision for India. That is what you call its Viksit Bharat 2047. We were looking at 5 years, 4 years, and every time, the government changes and these plans also change. At least he's put a roadmap till 2047. And Viksit Bharat is something which resonates with everybody. Now, in that, what kind of Atmanirbhar Bharat we can, how we make it really happen, how we are going to sort of revamp our education system, right? How industrialization is going to take place, how we are going to harness digital technology for the growth of our country. These are some basic areas. Like you would seen that India has a demographic dividend about 31, sort of more than 50% of our people are less than 31 years of age. Skilling India is extremely important. If we don't skill India and these people, there is a jobless growth, then you've seen what happened in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and even in Bangladesh. So we have to pay little more attention to this. As far as Kashmir is concerned, I think we should go ahead with the elections. Let the statehood be restored there. And there are still pro-India or nationalistic constituencies in India. Over the years, what we did, we tried to create some new constituencies which had very little locus standi or credibility, and they have had a very short lifespan. So let's now invest in the nationalistic constituencies there, build them up, encourage them, and bring them to fore. As far as Ladakh region is concerned, it's extremely crucial. I was very recently on a visit to Ladakh, and this sixth schedule is a very emotive issue there, right? That why they've been deprived of right to vote. And as a result, otherwise, the two antagonistic regions, Ladakh, that is Leh and Kargil, they had serious differences, but they've come to a common platform. You have, Leh Apex Body and Kargil Democratic Alliance, they've come together. And sixth schedule is a very, very popular sentiment with them. So we got to look at that so that some of their concerns regarding their jobs, land, environment are addressed in a comprehensive manner. We cannot have a rescue Ladakh Union Territory because that will be to the advantage of Chinese. So these are some of the measures that I think need to be further deliberated upon and factored in our roadmap of Viksit Bharat.
Thank you, Major Sharma. Very nice talking to you, and I hope the government of India listens to your views on these topics.
I just sort of end this conversation on three mantras which have always resonated well with me. One is what Thucydides said: strongs do what they can, weak suffer what they must, right? And then there's another very popular author, Paulo Coelho, who said, love everyone, but never sell your sword. And last is Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, who said, speak softly, but carry a big stick and you will go far. I think if we heed these three mantras, we would be able to add more gravitas to India's rise
yes.
and the rightful place in the comity of nations.
I think Cicero has said that to be have peace, you have to be always prepared for war. So that is also one of the, themes that we can accept. And the 3 points that you made are very accurate.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure talking.
Thank you, Major.